The story begins on a stormy midnight in a dense, spooky forest. Heavy rain pounds against the ground as an entire battalion of holy knights marches silently through the thick mud. They are heavily armored, their spears raised, hunting for a target they have been tracking for months. Soon, they found their target. One knight stepped forward and looked at the figure hanging weakly in front of him. He spoke and called out to the vampire. He asked if it had been fun hiding for half a year. The knight continued. He said that the vampire had killed many people during that time and called him a filthy beast. He added that playing tricks on the holy knights had been a decent move. The vampire's face was shown. His eyes were open wide, filled with pain and shock. Blood covered his face as he struggled to breathe. The knight spoke again. He said that the vampire's role ended here. He declared that God would not tolerate this any longer. He told the vampire to be proud, because his death would give him the title of Vampire Slayer. The vampire lay on the ground, his body twisted and broken. Blood soaked his clothes as rain washed over him. The knight continued speaking. He accused the vampire of deceiving the church and refusing to accept the judgment of the holy knights. He said the vampire's corrupted body proved all his sins. The knight then spoke again, as if remembering something. He asked if the vampire knew the truth. He said that he had not failed to catch him by accident. He had joined the pursuit squad late on purpose. He admitted that he allowed the vampire to run free all this time, and that because the vampire appeared after a long time, he chose to catch him slowly so he could stand out. He added that this was also meant to serve as a warning to those who did not believe. The vampire listened, thinking quietly. He already knew that this world was ultimately about survival of the fittest. No matter his own will, everything was decided by the power of the strong. That was why he had run away. In the next moment, the knight moved. A bright slash cut through the air. Blood sprayed as the strike landed. As the knight stood firm, he spoke once more. He said that the vampire's very existence looked down on the church and insulted the status of the church. Blood drifted through the darkness as a broken hand reached out weakly. A thought echoed in his mind. If he were given one more chance, this time would be different. Just then his eyes opened wide. He sucked in air sharply and sat up. His breath was rough and uneven as he gasped and panted. Confusion filled his face as he looked around. He muttered, asking what this was. Shock hit him moments later. He shouted in disbelief, asking what had happened. He realized that his neck, which had been severed, was fine. His arms and legs were also completely intact. He stared at his hands, trembling. In a dazed voice, he admitted that he should have definitely died. He paused and questioned himself, wondering if it had all been a dream. After looking around, he quickly denied it. He recognized the place. It was the tent he had lived in before the church's holy knights began hunting him. His gaze shifted, and he realized something else. The date was from half a year ago. It was just before the subjugation squad started chasing him. A shocking thought formed in his mind. He stood inside the tent, frozen in place. His eyes widened as the realization hit him. He could not believe it. He had returned to the past. He clenched his bandaged fist tightly. A thought formed in his mind. If he had truly been given another chance, then he would not repeat the same mistakes. The scene shifted to a quiet forest at sunrise. Warm light spread over the mountains and trees. This place was a secluded forest near Broadwin village, a place where humans rarely came. He had been living here in secret, hiding from human eyes. He survived by holding his breath and keeping his presence low because he was weak. He was nothing more than a weak vampire, barely surviving day by day. His name was Eugene. At first he did not crave human blood at all, but long ago he gave in to his instinct just once. That single mistake became the root of all his trouble. The very next day, mercenaries swarmed in, and 5 days later, holy knights began roaming the entire village. Whether it took a month or even a year, they never rushed. In the end, they always found him. Out of fear, he chose to live quietly. He drank only the blood of beasts in the forest and avoided humans completely. He lived like that for 12 long years. He did not know how he had returned to the past, or why his life had been extended. But none of that mattered now. There was only one important thing. He had been given this chance, and he could not repeat the same mistakes as before. Even if he tried to live quietly, death would still come one day. Knowing that, he clenched his fist and realized that he had no choice. He had to become strong enough that even if he was discovered, they would not be able to kill him. The green moon hung high in the sky as the forest fell silent. Standing by the water, he made a decision. From this moment on, he would change how he survived. He understood the nature of vampires. Vampires could absorb power by drinking blood. The stronger the owner of the blood, the greater the power that could be gained from it. As this thought settled in his mind, something suddenly appeared before him. It was the master of the forest. With a violent roar, the beast charged forward, shaking the ground as it attacked. Trees trembled as the creature closed in on him, its presence overwhelming the forest itself. The beast struck without warning. The impact sent him flying across the ground. Eugene rolled and struggled to regain his balance, his face tense as he narrowly avoided the next attack. With his weak body as it was now, dodging was the only thing he could do. The monster continued to press forward, its glowing eyes locked onto him as it attacked again. Eugene gritted his teeth and stayed focused. He knew his limits. With his current strength, he could not fight head-on, but if he could cause even a small wound, then he could drink its blood. As the beast opened its jaws and lunged closer, Eugene steadied himself, waiting for that single chance. Until now, Eugene had survived by hiding himself as much as possible and erasing his presence, but now he knew that this method would fail. There was no reason to hesitate anymore. At this moment, more than anyone else, he needed power. With a loud shout, Eugene struck down with his sword, putting all his strength into the blow. Suddenly, his eyes widened in shock as the sword broke into pieces. The next instant, the beast counterattacked. Its tail slammed into the ground with terrifying force. The impact sent Eugene flying through the air. He crashed down hard, blood spilling from his mouth as his body twisted on the ground. His vision shook, but his eyes stayed open, filled with desperation and resolve. The roamer opened its jaws wide and lunged forward. Seeing this, Eugene realized that he had underestimated the roamer's power far too much. Roamers referred to monsters that wandered in nature, not those residing in places known as demonic realms. Even in environments without mana, some roamers possessed mana stones. These stones were sometimes treated as more precious than jewels. To such a roamer, the mana stone was its core. The roamer charged through the shallow water, splashing mud and water in all directions. Eugene thought that if he could find the mana stone, he might be able to change the situation, but the difference in power was overwhelming. As the roamer twisted its body and surged forward again, Eugene realized something else. Perhaps he had taken the opportunity given to him too lightly. The roamer was the master of this forest. If that was the case, it could end his life before he could even leave a wound on it. The creature dove down from above, its body twisting through the air as it attacked again. Eugene remembered that he had once been given a chance. Because of that, he had thought it would not be strange if another chance appeared. But he immediately denied it. He knew himself well. He did not overestimate his own strength. That was why he had always survived by crawling, hiding, and enduring. And even now, facing the roamer's glowing eyes and sharp fangs, he understood the truth clearly. He was swallowed by the roamer's jaws. Sharp teeth closed in as darkness surrounded him. He held his breath and struggled with everything he had, fighting only to stay alive, just to live. Blood soaked his body as pain spread through him. His red eyes burned with resolve as he made his choice. He chose to fight and win, because if he did not win, there would be no next chance. There was no next after defeat. As his body was dragged deeper, something inside him reacted. A red glow pulsed from within, spreading like veins of light. He reached out with trembling hands, his fingers stretching toward the source. At that moment he made his move and seized it, the roamer's mana stone. The red core inside the roamer pulsed violently. A thought echoed clearly. Survival was always built on the blood of others. The mana stone shattered. A blinding explosion erupted from within the monster as light burst outward. The roamer's body trembled and collapsed, blood spraying everywhere. As the scene faded, a thought remained in Eugene's mind. If he were given another chance, it would not be the path of running away. He would not crawl anymore. He had chosen the path of fighting. The roamer's broken body fell into the blood-soaked land. Eugene walked forward calmly through the red swamp. His body was bare, marked with glowing patterns, and blood rippled under his feet. Roamer body parts fell from the sky behind him. He lifted his head and spoke quietly. So now everything was different. He would seize blood and victory. This time he would not run. This time he would win. Standing under the quiet night sky, Eugene realized that he only needed enough blood to become the master of the forest, but he had also absorbed the roamer's mana crystal. The mana inside that crystal was far greater than he expected. It was different in color and much larger than normal. From the mana crystal, he gained a new ability. His skin could change into black scales. As the scales spread over his arm, he understood their use. With this, he might be able to move during the day by blocking the sunlight. In his previous life he learned about the master of the forest through mercenaries. The wetlands were not very large, so only a few people knew about that place. However, when the area expanded because of monsoons and floods, the master appeared. It attacked the mercenaries without warning. During the chaos, he managed to drink a gulp of the injured master's blood. Because of that, he was able to defeat several mercenaries and escape from the forest. Through this, he realized how effective that blood was. He understood that he needed to drain the master's blood completely. Although he had gained some power, it was still not enough to fight Holy Knight Jungdirt. He knew he had to stop himself from rushing into a battle he could not win. Holy Knight Jungdirt was dangerous. No matter where he hid, the knight could still find him. It seemed that Jungdirt possessed a special ability that allowed him to locate monsters or the undead. Because of this, hiding was no longer an option. Instead, he needed to gather more strength so he could stand against the Holy Knights. Eugene looked up at the sky and noticed the moon slowly lowering. The sun would rise soon. It was still too early to test the full power of the mana crystal. With that thought, he decided to head back before sunrise. As Eugene was heading back to his cave, suddenly he heard a voice saying that the fake master, who had stolen its territory and turned the beautiful lake into a swamp, was finally dead. It could not believe that the fake had died in such a miserable way. Still, it felt grateful. But gratitude did not mean forgiveness. The ground had been stained with blood without care, and that sin had to be paid. The water surged and gathered. From the lake a figure formed, wrapped in flowing blue waves. It declared itself the guardian of the lake, and told Eugene that it was its territory. Looking at Eugene, it mockingly asked if he had heard anything at all. It called him a bald vampire and said that sensing spirits was a rare skill that only a few possessed. Eugene stood with his arms crossed and looked toward the voice calmly. He asked who it was. The guardian of the lake, Murim, froze for a moment. It let out a confused sound and stared at Eugene in shock. It could not believe what it was seeing. Eugene repeated his question, asking Murim who it was. Murim hesitated and then asked if he could actually see it. When Eugene replied that he could, after a brief pause, the spirit finally introduced itself. It said it was a water spirit named Murim. Murim explained that it was originally the master of this place. 15 years ago, a crocodile took the territory and forced it into slavery. Murim laughed lightly and said that maybe calling it slavery was not accurate. It was more like a strategic partnership. Since food would not come if the water was dirty, the crocodile relied on Murim to keep the water clean. In the end, none of that mattered now. Because of Eugene, the crocodile was dead and the land had been purified. It said that everything was thanks to Eugene. Murim spoke excitedly. It said it was sure it had seen a bald old man get eaten by the crocodile. It wondered if that had been a disguise used to kill the crocodile, and praised how careful the plan was. It asked again if that disguise was meant to lower the crocodile's guard. Eugene listened quietly. His eyes shifted as he noticed something strange. One of the glowing tattoos on his body was fading away. He asked why that was happening. Murim laughed and said it should use formal language. It looked at the markings on his body and said they were amazing. It asked what they meant and wondered if they were symbols of warriors or names of people he had killed. Eugene shook his head slightly. He said he did not know either. He had always had those tattoos. The last thing he clearly remembered was that he once had 10 tattoos on his body. He could not remember much from his early days. Instead of thinking about himself, he had simply devoted his life to living quietly. He thought to himself that if those tattoos were marks or a kind of spell, then one of them might have been released because of what happened that day. After that thought, he said he was leaving and told the spirit to protect the forest well. The water spirit Murim was shocked. It complained that it had finally found someone to talk to after a long time, yet he was already leaving. It explained that as time passed, fewer and fewer beings could see spirits, which made it lonely. It said it was happy to finally have someone to talk to. Eugene then asked Murim if it was not planning to change the swamp back into a lake. Murim said that purifying the place would take a very long time. Trying to be polite, Murim offered Eugene clean water. It called him a pale and beautiful man and said its water tasted amazing because it was a water fairy. It added that if he drank clear water, his complexion would improve. However, Eugene showed no interest. When the spirit excitedly pushed the water toward him, he coldly told it to get lost. The water fairy panicked and begged him to wait. It said it could also purify water and make any water drinkable right away. However, Eugene continued walking forward without stopping. He calmly said that he did not need it. The water fairy Murim chased after him in a hurry, desperately calling out to him as he disappeared deeper into the forest. Several days later, Night fell over Broadwin village. The village rested quietly under the moonlight, lights glowing softly between the houses. Suddenly, a villager burst into the room in panic. He begged the village chief to come quickly and shouted that the red-eyed monster had appeared. The village chief froze in shock and asked what he was talking about. Not long after, the villagers gathered outside. They stared ahead with wide eyes, unable to believe what they were seeing. Children pointed excitedly. One shouted that there was a boar. Another wondered how there could be so much meat. On the ground lay many animals: boars, deer, rabbits, and birds, neatly piled together. More villagers rushed over and called out to the chief, saying there was even more today. They asked if it was really okay to take all of it. A young villager looked at the pile of animals and spoke quietly. He wondered what the red-eyed monster was thinking. He said that the monster usually gave them animals once every fortnight. The village chief listened with a serious face. He replied that it was not time yet. The red-eyed monster lived far away, at the foot of the mountain, away from the village. The villagers called him the red-eyed monster. It had lived around the village for the past 10 years and had never been a threat. Late at night it would come by and leave dead animals once every fortnight. Still, the village chief admitted that he could not understand what the monster was thinking. In the forest, the hooded figure appeared quietly. He asked if he could step into the village for a moment. After a short pause, the village chief gave him permission. He remembered that when the monster first appeared 10 years ago, everyone had been afraid of him. However, since he paid his taxes by giving dead animals, no one paid much attention to him anymore. That was how their strange relationship had lasted for over 10 years. In the village, people gathered nervously. Someone stuttered and said it had been a long time. Another replied the same, saying it had been a while. The villagers stood together, staring at the red-eyed monster as their long and uneasy relationship quietly continued. The village chief gathered his courage and asked if the visitor had something he wished to say. Eugene slowly lifted his head. He said that after a long time living in isolation, his sickness had finally been healed. He explained that he came to the village to share this good news. In the past he had received great help from the village. Because of that, he wanted to return the favor. So as a favor, if something ever happened to the village, he would step in to help. The villagers were stunned. The village chief nervously asked who he really was. Others could only stare, confused and speechless. Eugene smiled. He gently revealed his beautiful face and told them to call him anytime they needed him. At that moment all the villagers gasped. Some shouted in shock, asking if he was really the red-eyed monster. Others covered their eyes, saying the light was blinding. Fear and confusion spread through the crowd. Someone wondered if the monster who lived in the forest was actually a half-elf, or perhaps even a noble. The village chief stared in shock. He could not believe it. The monster always wore a mask, yet he was this good-looking. Sometime later, Murim asked why Eugene had given all the animals he hunted to the villagers and what he was really thinking. It told Eugene that a vampire should desire blood, slaughter, and death. Eugene walked calmly through the forest. He replied that in the human world, showing one's face was important. It was a sign of good faith. However, Murim grew louder and angrier. It asked Eugene if he planned to be friendly with humans instead of eating them. It reminded him that he was supposed to leave in a few days and said there was no need to get involved with the village. Eugene stopped and gently put on his mask. He told Murim that he had thought there would be nothing here, but he was wrong. He could not remain a spectator to what was about to happen, so he told Murim that before long mercenaries would raid the village and kill all the villagers. Murim, confused, asked Eugene what he meant. Eugene explained that the mercenaries came to Broadwin village to find and take a boy. Their goal was to kidnap him and bring him to the castle of the region's lord, Sir Tyrwin. When the mercenaries attacked, the village was set on fire. People screamed as they were cut down. To prevent any witnesses, the mercenaries killed all the villagers, and Eugene knew that if he did not stop that incident from happening, the future where holy nights surrounded his home would come true. Murim looked uneasy. It asked if that was really true. If it was, then how did he know about it? It said it was hard to believe that everyone in the village would be killed. Even after spending several days with Eugene, Murim still could not understand him. It wondered what he was really thinking. Meanwhile, Eugene told Murim that no matter what, he needed to gain the villagers' trust first and appear harmless to them. Murim, confused, asked Eugene what the mercenaries causing chaos had to do with gaining the villagers' trust. Before it could finish, Eugene suddenly stopped moving. Murim crashed into him and cried out in pain. It complained and asked why he suddenly stopped. Eugene did not answer. Ahead on the road, a group of armed men appeared. They walked toward him through the forest. One of them noticed him and asked who he was, wondering why his hair looked like that. Another said he looked like he was from the village. The mercenaries hesitated. One of them asked what they should do, since they were planning to ambush the village. Another mercenary stared at the man and laughed, commenting that he was very pretty for a man. The mercenaries whispered among themselves. One of them said the man did not look like he had a proper weapon. Another added that he was alone. One of them warned that it would be bad if the man screamed, so he ordered one of his men not to give him the chance. A masked mercenary rushed forward and raised his axe high, swinging it down without hesitation. At the same moment, Murim cried out his name in alarm. Eugene moved. In a single instant his body shifted. A sharp motion cut through the air. Blood sprayed across the forest path as the attacking mercenary was struck down before the axe could land, his cloak fluttering slightly while the fallen body collapsed behind him. He calmly told Murim to think about it. He needed to gain the villagers' trust so he would not look suspicious. After all, he was going to kill all of these mercenaries. A scream rang out through the forest. Someone shouted in panic that the man was a vampire. Another voice trembled and said he was not human. The mercenaries quickly reacted. One of them shouted not to be scared. He said this was actually good news. He raised his sword high and yelled that if they handed the vampire over to the church alive, they would receive a huge reward. Before he could finish speaking, his attack was interrupted. In a blur, the sword strike was stopped. The mercenary's eyes widened in shock as Eugene appeared right in front of him. Eugene's red eyes looked cold and calm. Blood splattered across his face. In the next moment, a sharp slash cut through the air. Another mercenary was struck down, his body thrown aside as blood sprayed across the ground. A mercenary shouted in fear that this was no ordinary vampire. He yelled that they needed at least the vampire's corpse. Another man rushed forward, swinging his sword and shouting that the vampire's head would be his. The blades clashed as the attack came down. Eugene moved through the strikes, blood splashing as weapons passed by him. One mercenary screamed and called him a demon as he charged in recklessly. From behind, another voice shouted in anger, telling him not to rush in like that. The bald mercenary raised his spiked mace high and roared that he would smash him. The spiked mace slammed down with great force. Sparks and dust burst out as the attack was stopped. The bald mercenary stared in shock. Sweat poured down his face as he shouted that there was no way the vampire had stopped it. Eugene spoke calmly and said that the sun was setting. At that moment, his red eye shone sharply. Before anyone could react, he moved. A scream rang out as his body flashed forward. In the next instant, a heavy impact echoed through the forest as another mercenary was smashed into the ground, blood splattering across the earth. Eugene walked forward calmly, blood dripping from his blade. Bodies lay scattered around him. He thought to himself that nighttime was his time, the best time to hide blood. From deeper in the forest, frightened voices shouted. Someone yelled not to rush at him and warned that he was a monster. Another voice shouted that they needed to attack him together. Sometime later, a group of villagers surrounded the area. Firelight flickered across their tense faces. The village chief stared at the scene in shock and whispered in disbelief, wondering how this could have happened. Behind him, people groaned and struggled to stand, fear filling their eyes. The village chief looked at the bodies and asked in a trembling voice if all of this was done by him. Eugene stepped out of the shadows. His red eyes glowed faintly in the dark as he answered calmly. He said it was not planned. He had simply found them on his way back from hunting. He added that he had only been checking his traps. He pointed at the bodies on the ground and said it looked like they were ambushed on the way to Broadwin village. He said these men were the culprits. The villagers froze in shock. Someone stammered in disbelief. Then a voice cried out in alarm, realizing who the real attackers were: black wolves. In the darkness, the body of a wolf lay on the ground, its mouth open and tongue hanging out. Eugene said there were many of them, so he attacked while they were eating the corpses. He explained that some were dead, but there were more wolves than mercenaries. He added that the ones who escaped might still be watching them from somewhere nearby. The village chief looked uneasy. He said the black wolves were infamous in this area and asked how one person could kill them all alone. Doubt spread among the crowd. Someone wondered if this was really the doing of the red-eyed monster. At that moment, another villager shouted urgently. He said there were wolf claw marks on the corpses. Another villager quickly spoke up and said he saw the same thing. He said all of them were attacked by wolves. The village chief frowned. He said the black wolves were dangerous, but it did not make sense for them to ambush a group of mercenaries like this. He looked at Eugene and lowered his head. He apologized and said he had doubted him before. Eugene replied calmly that it was fine and that such things happened. The chief then asked what should be done with the corpses. Eugene explained that he told them because he could not just leave the bodies there. The chief sighed and said they would have to bury them in the village. At that moment, Murim spoke from behind. It said that Eugene lied every time he spoke. The wolves only appeared after the mercenaries were already killed. That meant the wolves were not the ones who attacked first. Then the scene shifted to the past. Eugene was the one who killed the wolves himself, and the claw marks and bite marks on the corpses were also made by him. Murim smiled, saying that covering up crimes was clever, but it wondered why he cared so much about his image. It thought there would have been no need to do all this if he had simply left. Of course, people might have suspected him, but it still felt unnecessary. As it watched him closely, it realized that he seemed to have some kind of plan. Eugene suddenly spoke and said he had searched the corpses to find any items that could be returned to their families. He took something out and showed it to the village chief. One of the mercenaries had a letter. He asked if it should be read. The village chief looked at the seal and froze. He said it was Sir Tyrwin's seal, the Lord's mark. His hands trembled as he stared at the letter. Shock filled his face as he reacted, unable to believe what he was seeing. He looked up and asked in disbelief if this was true. The village chief suddenly shouted for Felid, asking where he was. Someone replied that Felid was in the village and asked why it mattered. The village chief told everyone that Felid might be Sir Tyrwin's illegitimate son. It became clear that the mercenaries had come because of Felid. Everyone was shocked. They could not believe it, that the kid was really a noble. Some time ago, before Eugene killed those mercenaries, when Eugene was killing the mercenaries, their boss was in shock. His face twisted in fear as he shouted in disbelief, wondering how one person could kill so many so fast. Meanwhile, Eugene cut through enemies in a single smooth motion. Bodies fell before anyone could react. The remaining mercenaries trembled. One of them shouted that if they tried to run back, they would be killed anyway. With fear in their eyes, they chose to fight instead of hesitating. Even in their panic, one of the mercenaries shouted that no matter how strong he was, he still only had 2 arms and 2 legs. He told everyone not to rush in one by one and ordered them to attack together. On the ground, a wounded man clenched his teeth. Sweat ran down his face as he realized he could not even run. In despair, he wondered why that man had to appear at this moment. Before he could think further, a scream echoed through the forest. Eugene moved again. In a blink, blood sprayed into the air as another mercenary was cut down. One of them charged forward in desperation, swinging his weapon with all his strength. The next second, his body was sent flying and slammed hard into a tree. A loud crash rang out as he hit the trunk and collapsed, motionless on the ground. Bodies lay scattered across the forest ground. Weapons were dropped everywhere, and blood stained the earth. The mercenary leader begged Eugene to stop, pleading again for him to stop. He looked up with fear and pain in his eyes. Struggling to speak, he asked if Eugene had been waiting for them from the very beginning. Breathing heavily, he asked why. With his last strength, he questioned why they had been targeted at all. The wounded man trembled as he spoke. He said they were only trying to do their job. Eugene looked down at him and calmly said that he wanted to know what that job was. Standing there, blood dripping from his body, he spoke coldly. He said that the village belonged to him. Hearing this, the mercenary panicked. Tears mixed with sweat as he hurriedly apologized, saying he did not know it was his village. He quickly added that they were not there to hunt his kind. The illegitimate son of the Tyrwin family was hiding in that village. People thought the boy had gone missing, but he was only hiding his identity. They were only there to look for him. Eugene stared at him and said calmly that he was a very skilled liar. He asked what his real purpose was. He pointed out that there was no reason to bring so many people for such a simple mission. He asked if they were planning to wipe out the entire village. The mercenary panicked and shouted that it was not like that. He admitted that the man was not completely wrong, but there was more to it. Shaking badly, he confessed that they were not actually hired by the Tyrwin family patriarch. Their true clients were Kamara Tyrwin and Verthel Tyrwin. He explained that it was likely due to power struggles among the nobles. Their real task was to kidnap the illegitimate son. The reason so many mercenaries were sent was because they wanted to be cautious in case something went wrong. Kneeling on the ground, the mercenary lowered his head and begged for forgiveness. Eugene narrowed his eyes. He already knew that person would be involved in this. Verthel Tyrwin. He recalled Verthel as the commander of the vampire hunter squad, and also the knight who had once harassed him along with Jing Dirift. Thinking calmly, he reasoned that Verthel likely did not order the mercenaries to massacre the village. Since he was still a knight, He believed the destruction was probably the mercenaries' own decision. That incident, however, became the reason the paladins found him. Because an entire village disappeared, many people were mobilized to search the area. On the ground, the mercenary cried in fear. He said he only thought it was a good opportunity. He insisted that if he had known the man was there, he would never have done it. Eugene turned away and calmly told him to be careful of wolves on the way back. The mercenary froze in shock. He could not believe what he was hearing. With trembling eyes, he asked if he was really being allowed to live. He hurriedly thanked him for the mercy. Before he could even relax, a sudden impact struck him. His body was sent flying, crashing hard against the ground. Looking at the dead man, Miriam asked if Eugene was really going to kill the man just like that. Eugene replied coldly that the mercenary already knew he was a vampire, so he could not be allowed to live. Then he added one more thing. In the dark forest, pairs of glowing eyes slowly appeared from the shadows. More and more lights flickered between the trees. The wolves had arrived, watching closely, drool dripping from their mouths. In the present, the villagers gathered with torches in their hands, their faces filled with worry. One man asked the chief if it was true. The chief confirmed that the dead mercenaries were guards sent to take Felid to the castle. Someone remembered that Felid had lost his mother last year. Another villager recalled that he came to their village 8 years ago. The group grew uneasy. They said the mercenaries who were supposed to take Felid to the Lord had been killed. No one knew what to do next. Then Eugene asked if Felid still needed to be taken to the Lord's castle. The village chief paused for a moment and answered yes. Upon hearing this, Eugene told the village chief that the mercenaries might not have survived the beasts in the forest, but he could escort Felid to the city. He explained that he had lived in the woods for a long time and knew the way. Hearing this, the village chief asked in disbelief if he really meant he would protect Felid, but he also said that they could not ask him to do such a thing. Eugene smiled calmly and said that it was all right. He said a knight would never refuse a chance to help. The villagers stared in shock. Confusion spread across their faces. One of them whispered in disbelief, asking if he was a knight. Eugene apologized for the late introduction. With a faint smile, he introduced himself. He said his name was Jan Eugene, from the Eugene house. Miriam shouted back in disbelief, asking who would ever believe such a thing. The villagers whispered among themselves in shock. Someone asked if that red-eyed monster was actually a noble. The crowd stirred. One person shouted that it was rude to say such a thing and told them they should call him Sir Eugene. Miriam complained loudly, saying that even if it was a lie, this had gone too far. Eugene smiled faintly and said they had already seen the villagers' reactions earlier. He explained that these people had never seen a noble before. The whole village was in chaos. The boy who had been hiding in a mountain village turned out to be a noble, and no one could stay calm. Even if he pretended to be a noble, they had no way to tell the difference. Meanwhile, the villagers crowded around him. One nervously asked if it was true that he was really a knight. Others excitedly asked why he had lived alone in the forest for more than 10 years. Some wondered if it was to heal wounds from knight training, or if it was some special training knights usually did. Eugene finally spoke. He said that due to various circumstances he had cut ties with people and lived in the forest. The villagers nodded in understanding. Someone said it made sense now, and claimed they had always felt he was different since the day he started bringing food to the village. Another added that with a knight's excellent swordsmanship, it was no surprise he could live alone in the forest. The village chief spoke honestly. He said their village was poor, so they did not have the means to properly reward him. Eugene replied calmly that it was fine. He said he wanted to rest and recover his strength and asked if he could stay in the village for the night. The chief laughed warmly and said it was no trouble at all. He invited him to stay at his house even though it was humble. The next day, Eugene stood by a small window, looking out into the forest as morning light filtered through the trees. His red eye slowly opened. Black scales spread across his hand as he pressed it down, covering his skin. He thought that if he covered himself with these black scales, they could block sunlight to some extent. Because of that, there would be fewer problems during the journey. Miriam floated nearby and scolded him. It called him an ignorant, night-dwelling vampire and asked what he was thinking, telling such a lie. It pointed out that he had called himself a knight, yet could not even read. Eugene admitted calmly that he might be exposed someday, but since he was going to leave anyway, he said it did not matter. Miriam hovered in front of him and demanded that he stop talking in circles. It asked him directly what his goal was. It questioned why he had lived quietly in the forest for so long, yet suddenly started making friends in the village and even accepting their requests. Just then, a voice came from outside. calling out respectfully and addressing him as Sir Eugene. They said everything was ready and that he could depart whenever he wished. Eugene looked at Miriam and calmly raised his hand. He said that he had gained social status overnight. He explained that humans sometimes trusted a person's authority more than any clever words. He added that one could lie as much as they wanted, but by placing status in front, 100 lies could be reduced to 10. Although he knew this village might be the only place that would accept such a hastily made lie, nobles on the other hand would be far less likely to believe it so easily. Standing in the dim room, he lifted a black mask toward his face. He said that from now on he would turn this lie into the truth. He had already built trust through his good deeds. The village chief stepped forward and respectfully handed over a written explanation. He said he wrote it so Sir Eugene would not be misunderstood. With a worried expression, he asked Sir Eugene to please take good care of the young master named Felid. Everyone believed in him. The young man with a backpack introduced himself and said his name was Felid. He bowed slightly and said he looked forward to Sir Eugene's guidance. To turn all of these lies into the truth, Sir Eugene knew he needed a high status. He calmly acknowledged Felid and introduced himself as Jan Eugene, saying he looked forward to working together. In his heart he decided that he would use Felid to become a real noble. The two of them then left the village and walked down a long road together, heading toward the mountains. As they traveled, Eugene looked ahead and pointed at a village in the distance. He asked if that village was called Brahms. After checking the signboard nearby, Felid confirmed that it was indeed Brahms. Eugene glanced at the signboard and asked in surprise if Felid could read. Felid nodded and said that his late mother had taught him how to read. He explained that his mother's status was low, so she never received a proper education. She once told him that someone she loved had taught her instead. Hearing this, Sir Eugene thought quietly that he never expected that person to be Sir Tyrwin. Seeing this, Miriam suggested that Eugene should ask Felid to teach him letters. Sir Eugene then calmly asked if Felid could also teach him how to read and write. Felid froze in shock. He stared at Eugene in disbelief and asked if he meant him. Felid hesitated and said that Eugene was a knight, so he thought he would already know how to read. He wondered if Sir Eugene truly could not read. Eugene replied calmly that being a knight was just for show. He said his family had already fallen, so there was nothing to boast about. Until now, it was not letters that kept him alive, but a single sword. Felid looked at him with surprise and said he did not know Sir Eugene's family had already fallen. Without saying anything more, Sir Eugene turned his back and continued walking down the road. As they moved forward, Eugene knew Felid was doubting him, but once he gained his trust, it would become thick enough to cover every lie. Meanwhile, Miriam laughed softly and mocked Eugene, saying his acting was perfect. It then reassured him that everything was fine, but warned that if he used lies too much, people might start to suspect him. At that moment, Felid suddenly froze. His eyes widened in shock as he looked at Eugene. His heart trembled. Just then, Miriam noticed Felid's expression and thought that look in his eyes meant he already believed Eugene. Felid stopped and bowed his head. He apologized to Sir Eugene and admitted honestly that he had been suspicious of him before. He said that people in the village had called Eugene a monster instead of a noble. Because of that, he realized he must have been biased. Felid spoke sincerely. He said he would judge with his own eyes instead of believing rumors. He added that if Eugene came from a warrior background, it made sense that he might have neglected studying letters. Felid then promised that he would secretly teach Eugene whenever he could, so Eugene would not be embarrassed in front of others. Hearing this, Eugene's red eye narrowed slightly. Felid asked him to tell him more about himself. In the next moment, a sharp blade suddenly flew toward Felid's face, but before it could hit him, Eugene swung his arm forward and blocked the flying weapon. Felid screamed in fear. From behind, several figures rushed forward, weapons raised, charging toward them from the rocky path. One of the men laughed and complained that he had already told the other to pull it properly. The other replied that he did exactly as he was taught earlier. Hearing their voices, Felid's eyes widened. He finally understood the situation. His heart sank as he realized they were bandits. The man with the weapon smiled coldly and said that, judging by their expressions, they were probably thinking the same thing. He added that this would be over quickly. He ordered them to put all their luggage down, then told them to empty everything in their pockets as well. His tone turned threatening as he warned that if they did not move quickly, they would die. But before they could say another word, in the next instant, a blade flashed. Eugene moved first. His sword cut through the air in a wide arc. Blood sprayed as the attack landed cleanly. The bandit did not even have time to react before his body was thrown away and crashed onto the ground. The remaining bandits shouted in panic. One of them screamed for their leader as he raised his weapon and charged forward, slamming it down with all his strength. Eugene moved exactly as he had planned. His body was light and fast. He slipped past the attack with ease, his movements clean and sharp. One of the bandits shouted angrily and swung his weapon down with all his strength. In the next moment, a red arc flashed through the air. Eugene's blade cut deep. Blood sprayed as the strike landed, and the bandit collapsed without a chance to fight back. Another bandit froze in fear. His face turned pale as he stepped back, trembling. He tried to shout for help, his voice shaking. Before he could finish speaking, a blade shot toward him at terrifying speed. The strike landed. Blood burst out as the blade cut through his body. His scream was cut short, turning into a broken gasp. The bandit collapsed to the ground, his body going limp as the sound echoed across the rocky path. The fight ended in silence. Eugene stood on the rocky slope, looking at the bodies scattered around. Blood stained the ground. He spoke calmly, saying he truly could not understand why humans always tried to kill and rob those who were weaker than them. He questioned whether looking weak meant it was acceptable to torment someone. Eugene then turned toward Felid. He told him that once he learned how to read, he wondered if he would be able to understand things like this too. Felid froze, his eyes widened in shock as blood splashed near his feet. He struggled to speak, clearly shaken by what he had just witnessed. Eugene stepped closer and gently reminded Felid that he had said he would judge things with his own eyes. Eugene then looked at him steadily and said that Felid was free to believe whatever he wanted. But he promised him one thing, that not a single drop of blood would ever touch Felid's body. Sometime later, they reached the city. The city was lively and crowded. Tall buildings stood close together, and narrow streets were filled with people. Stalls lined the road as merchants shouted loudly to attract customers. Rare medicinal herbs from a northern dungeon raid had just arrived, and sellers eagerly called out their prices. Some asked for 20 bronze coins per bundle, while others argued that their goods were of higher quality. Buyers and sellers went back and forth, bargaining without pause. Some complained that nearby shops were selling the same items for cheaper, while merchants insisted their products were better. Amid the noise, Miriam laughed with excitement, saying that everything here was strange and interesting. Below her, Eugene and Felid walked through the crowd. Felid looked uneasy and quietly warned Eugene to be careful while shopping. He explained that he had been here a few times with the village chief and that the merchants were so exploitative that it was easy to get tricked. He added that the village chief always became completely flustered whenever he came to this place. A loud argument broke out at one of the stalls. A customer shouted angrily, saying the same item was being sold for half the price at another shop and demanded a refund. The shopkeeper crossed his arms and refused, and the tension drew attention from nearby people. Eugene watched the scene quietly. Inside his mind, he thought that being careful did not matter if he had no money to begin with. He then told Felid to wait there for a moment. Felid nodded and agreed. Eugene walked into a shop and placed a large piece of leather on the counter. He calmly asked the shopkeeper to set a price for it. The shopkeeper paused and looked closely. He muttered in surprise that it was black wolf leather. He added that this kind of material was rare here, and there was a lot of it too. The shopkeeper's eyes narrowed as he examined Eugene more carefully. He noticed Eugene's worn clothes and simple appearance. In his mind, he judged that Eugene was not a trader but a wandering traveler. A greedy smile slowly formed on the shopkeeper's face. He thought to himself that Eugene looked like an easy target. The shopkeeper laughed and pretended to sigh. He said the leather was badly damaged and questioned whether it could even be used. After a short pause, he claimed it would be worth only 18 silver coins at most. Eugene stood quietly, his face hidden under his hood. His red eyes stared forward without emotion. The shopkeeper suddenly felt uneasy. As he looked closer, he noticed Eugene's eyes glowing an unnatural red. His heart skipped and sweat rolled down his face. In his mind, he wondered what was wrong with this man, and why his gaze felt so terrifying. Panicking, the shopkeeper quickly changed his tone. He stammered that black wolf leather was rare and limited in quantity. He added that because of its value, he could pay a bit more. The air grew heavy as Eugene stepped closer. A faint glow shone beneath the hood, making the shopkeeper's fear deepen. Trying to regain control, the shopkeeper forced himself to speak loudly. He told Eugene that if he was dissatisfied, he should say it with words instead. The shopkeeper suddenly burst into loud laughter. Sweat dripped down his head as he leaned over the counter and said that since it seemed to be Eugene's first time here, he would be generous. He raised the price and said he would give 23 coins. Eugene remained silent. A low sound escaped him as he slowly thought it over. The shopkeeper grew more nervous. Seeing no reaction, he asked if Eugene was still not satisfied. His voice shook as he hurriedly added that he could raise it a bit more, offering 25 coins. Eugene stayed quiet again. The pressure in the air became heavier. The shopkeeper panicked and quickly corrected himself, saying 27 coins instead. Eugene finally made a sound, Felid watching from the side. At that moment, Eugene's red eye narrowed sharply. His gaze turned cold as the shopkeeper questioned how much more the man was trying to squeeze out of him. The shopkeeper's face went pale. His legs trembled as he shouted that 30 silver coins was his limit and that he could not go any higher. Hearing this, Eugene nodded and calmly agreed. He decided to take the 30 silver coins offer. After getting the money, Eugene did some shopping and got himself a good pair of clothes. After that, they started heading back to their destination. As nightfall came, Eugene decided to take a break in the forest. He quickly set up camp and lit a fire, then sat beside it. Eugene stared at the paper with a calm expression. He thought that although he had learned the basics from Felid, he was still far from being able to read it properly. Meanwhile, Murim glanced at Eugene's clothes and told him that they looked decent enough. He said that when people thought of vampires they usually imagined silk robes, but for this quality the money spent was worth it. However, Eugene was happy to see that this market had actually been generous. The merchant had even thrown in extra items even though Eugene was a first-timer. Nearby, Murim floated in the air, glowing with excitement. He looked at Eugene and asked if he meant that weak merchant from earlier. Murim clicked his tongue in frustration. He complained that this was exactly the moment Eugene should have pushed harder and bought something really expensive, like high-quality silk. However, Eugene told him that he only needed something that could block sunlight. Murim floated in the air and reacted loudly. He asked what that was supposed to mean and told Eugene that he should enjoy life a bit more. He wondered if Eugene had really just stayed at home all this time. He said that a vampire was a noble among nobles, living a luxurious life in a luxurious castle, commanding servants and drinking fresh blood like wine. If someone wanted to rise in the world, they had to burn with ambition, even if people slandered them. Eugene replied calmly. He said that for someone who claimed to have lived only in a swamp, Murim sure knew a lot. Murim answered that he was originally from the spirit realm. He reminded Eugene that powerful seniors from the human world often came there. Those seniors left behind many words of wisdom that stayed with him deeply. He continued, saying that unless a vampire was killed by a silver blade or a stake, they could live for at least 200 years. Because of that, one should learn a little bit of everything. He added that studying ancient characters and the imperial language was important too. Eugene then looked at Murim and asked if he knew how to read. Murim answered simply that he did not. He said that he did not know how to read or write. Eugene asked Murim calmly if he could do anything besides making drinking water. Just then, Felid called out to Eugene from behind. He apologized and asked who Eugene had been talking to just now. Eugene replied calmly that he had just been talking to himself. He then asked how Felid's stomach was. Felid lowered his head and apologized for showing such an unpleasant scene. He explained that while preparing the rabbit, it reminded him of what had happened that morning, and before he realized it, he felt unwell. Eugene watched him quietly. He said it was probably a bit too intense for him. He added that ordinary people were not used to seeing corpses, so it was understandable. However, Felid told him not to worry. He said he still had stamina left, and the night was long. He still had plenty of leftover paper, so he would teach Eugene as much writing as he wanted. The fire crackled softly in the forest as the two of them sat facing each other. The warm light danced across the trees while sparks drifted into the night. Eugene looked at the paper in his hand and quietly wondered if learning letters was really supposed to be this easy. Felid looked at him with wide eyes and quickly replied that it was because Eugene was amazing. Eugene answered calmly that such praise was too much. Felid scratched his head and said that people had called him a quick learner before, but even so it had taken him several months to learn everything. He added that for most people it usually took about a year. Eugene lowered his gaze and asked Felid if this would truly be enough. He said that once they arrived, being able to read just a little might not be sufficient, especially since the boy was becoming a noble's child overnight. Felid hesitated. He said that his mother had never told him the details, and he had never really thought deeply about it before. Looking down, he admitted that it still did not feel real to him. To begin with, he had not even expected Sir Tyrwin to welcome him at all. Under the moonlit sky, the quiet night was suddenly broken. A group of armed men approached the camp. Horses snorted softly as Boots stepped closer. One man raised his hand in greeting and walked forward with a friendly smile. He greeted them casually and said that his group was having trouble finding a good place to camp. He asked if he could ask them something. Eugene stayed seated by the fire, his expression calm but alert. Felid behind him stiffened and looked at the strangers with unease. Eugene observed the group and saw that they had proper weapons and armor, and their movements showed discipline. Seeing this, he realized they were real mercenaries, different from the wandering drifters they had met before. The mercenary group leader looked at Eugene and asked where they were headed. Eugene watched him carefully. He understood that the man was asking questions the way mercenaries usually did. Lying carelessly would only make things more suspicious. After a brief pause, Eugene answered calmly. He told them that they were on their way to Lord Tyrwin's castle. The man smiled and said that they were also heading to Lord Tyrwin's castle. He asked if they could share the campsite for the night. He even offered alcohol, water, and lamb meat in exchange. Just then, one of his companions frowned and whispered that it seemed like too much to offer. Still, the man waved it off and said they were going to share the spot anyway. He asked if there were any objections. Eugene remained silent, his red eye watching them calmly. Noticing the tension, the captain of the mercenary group quickly apologized. He explained that the loud one, Raban, had only joined their mercenary group recently and did not know his place yet. He asked Eugene to forgive him. Then the man introduced himself. He said his name was Partek and asked who Eugene was. Eugene answered calmly. He said that he was Knight Jan Eugene. The group froze for a moment after hearing that Eugene was a knight. Just then, Raban laughed loudly and turned to Partek, asking if he really believed that. He mocked Eugene, saying that he did not look like a knight at all. He pointed out that Eugene did not even have a horse or proper armor. Raban leaned closer and spoke bluntly. He told Eugene to be honest and asked if he was really a knight. He said that he had never heard of such an Eugene family before. Raban stepped forward with a twisted smile. His eyes glowed as he accused Eugene of lying. Eugene stayed calm. His red eyes watched them quietly. Inside his mind, he thought that he had already told Felid he was a knight, so he could not tell a different lie now. He also realized that the mercenaries had approached them for another reason. Whether he was truly a knight did not matter much to them. But if they kept pressing the matter, the situation would change. His gaze hardened. As he saw that there were not many of them, he reached a conclusion. If the situation turned bad, he could kill them all. Eugene's hand slowly moved toward the hilt of his sword as the night grew heavy with tension. But before the situation got bad, Partek suddenly called out Laban's name. Before Laban could react, Partek grabbed him by the collar and slammed him down. Laban's eyes widened in shock as he let out a startled sound. In the next instant, Partek struck him hard. The blow sent Laban flying across the ground, rolling violently as dust and debris scattered. Laban screamed as his body crashed and skidded to a stop. After that, Partek bent forward deeply and apologized. He begged for Eugene's mercy. Eugene finally spoke. He said that an apology would be enough, and told them to take their positions. Relief washed over the group. They quickly thanked him and moved away, careful not to cause more trouble. As the firelight reflected in Eugene's red eyes, his thoughts remained calm and cold. He realized that there would be many suspicions like this in the future. To avoid unnecessary trouble, he decided that he must become a true knight as soon as possible. Moments later, Laban lay on the ground gasping for air. His body trembled as a weak breath escaped his mouth. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open. Confusion crossed his face as he shouted, wondering what had just happened. Before he could move further, Partek stepped forward and scolded him harshly. He asked where Laban thought he was going, charging at a knight without any sense. He warned him that he was acting as if he had no attachment to his own life. Partek's expression darkened. He told Laban that his life had only been spared because of him. He reminded him that just moments ago, everyone had almost died because of Laban's reckless actions. Partek struck Laban again, knocking him back to the ground. Laban cried out in pain, saying he did not understand what was so scary about that shabby-looking man. He said the man was barely holding an old short sword. Partek looked at him and shook his head. He told Laban that judging only by appearances meant he could not see even one step ahead. Partek then asked Laban how much he thought the robe that knight was wearing cost. He explained that it was a high-quality robe lined with lichen-sloth leather. Even the cheapest kind cost more than 10 silver coins. Laban was shocked and stuttered, asking if it was really that expensive. Partek confirmed it and called him a fool, saying it was worth at least 3 times Laban's monthly salary. Then, pointing at Eugene, he told Laban that Eugene had been reading a letter, which meant he could read. That alone showed he was not ordinary. He added that Eugene had truly been about to draw his sword. If that had happened, everyone there would have died. If they were lucky, maybe only Partek and one other person would have survived. Laban swallowed hard and asked how Partek knew all that. Partek explained that while Laban had been running his mouth earlier without understanding the situation, Eugene had already been preparing to strike. He explained that Eugene's right hand was hidden inside his robe while his left foot was slightly pulled back. That stance showed clear intent. Such a posture meant the person had expertly aligned his center of gravity with the path of his sword. He added that if he had been even a moment later, Laban's head would have been sent flying. Laban panicked and shouted that the captain would have protected him. Partek looked at him and sighed. He asked if Laban truly had no idea how terrifying a knight really was. He explained that knights were born into ancient families and were given wooden swords from the moment they were born. From that day on, they spent their entire lives learning how to kill. They entered unknown dungeons without fear. They faced death head-on and stabbed monsters without hesitation. They also went to battlefields, cutting down other humans to gain merit. Only those who had stained their hands with that much blood could catch the attention of the nobility. In the end, those people were granted knighthood. He added that impersonating a knight was a grave crime. He explained that it was dangerous whether the knight was real or fake, and even worse if the person was pretending. He said that anyone daring enough to impersonate a knight could not be normal. A person could not casually claim to be a knight unless they were truly confident in their sword skills. Partek then asked how many people who devoted their entire lives to the sword actually became knights. He pointed out that if someone who looked barely over 20 openly revealed himself as a knight, it meant that person possessed considerable skill. Laban swallowed nervously and asked if that meant the man was stronger than the captain. Partek answered calmly that it was probably so. Laban then recalled that the knight had said he was heading to Lord Tiwin's castle. Partek added that there were rumors about a newly discovered dungeon possibly opening, and that Eugene was likely aiming to take part in that. Partek said that since their destinations were the same, they would encounter the knight again. Eugene listened to Partek's conversation silently. He wondered to himself if the title of knight really carried such heavy weight. He hoped this method would continue to work, but he knew he still needed to prepare a bit more. He observed the mercenaries quietly. Aside from the one who had been knocked down with a single blow, the rest were all proper mercenaries. He wondered why the Tiwin family would hire trash when they already had mercenaries like these. He thought it would have made more sense to send their own soldiers. The situation felt strange. After that, he headed toward Partek. Seeing Eugene coming toward them, Laban became frightened and wondered why he was approaching them. Eugene approached Partek and told him that he had overheard their destination was also Lord Tiwin's castle. Since their destinations were the same, he invited them to travel together. The mercenaries froze for a moment. One of them reacted in surprise, while another stared in shock. After a brief pause, they quickly agreed. The next day, they arrived at Martella, a village within the Tiwin territory. The streets were busy as people moved through the town, carts rolling past and merchants calling out. Hidden beneath his hood, Eugene walked calmly through the crowd. He thought to himself that the mercenary group truly believed he was a knight. That misunderstanding worked in his favor. Traveling with them would help him gather useful information. Still, he knew the real problem was what would come next. Suddenly, Murim called out his name. He reported that he had followed his orders and secretly listened to the mercenaries while they talked among themselves. Hearing this, Eugene asked him if he had learned anything important. Murim then relayed the information he had gathered. Lord Tiwin's health was extremely poor. It was so bad that it would not be surprising if he were to die as early as tomorrow. He also learned that a new dungeon had recently been discovered within Lord Tiwin's territory. Conquering it could bring great wealth, but the Tiwin family did not have enough money or troops to open it. Eugene lowered his gaze and thought quietly. He knew opening a new dungeon was no small matter. Just then Murim spoke again and told Eugene that if Lord Tiwin died soon, Felid would become an orphan again the moment he arrived. However, Eugene told him that it was none of his business. Murim panicked and asked what they should do next. He worried that Felid might be killed by his brothers once Lord Tiwin was gone. Eugene remained silent. As they walked through the crowd, he finally understood the reason Lord Tiwin had summoned Felid. It was likely because he wanted to see his child's face one last time before he died. He looked ahead with calm eyes and spoke quietly. From this moment on, both of their fates would change in some way. Before Murim could respond, footsteps echoed loudly. Someone shouted that they had arrived. In front of them stood Rose Castle, the castle of Lord Tiwin. Tall walls and towers rose into the sky, far larger than expected. Eugene glanced up at the structure and thought that it was much bigger than he had imagined. Miriam floated beside him, his eyes shining with excitement. He praised the castle and said that Lord Eugene should also rise quickly and live in a place like this one. Eugene cut him off at once, telling him to stop talking nonsense. He said they should go inside already. The guards and mercenaries arrived at the castle entrance, and someone let out a quiet exclamation in surprise. One of the mercenaries stepped forward and greeted them, saying that they were the mercenary group sent by the Palin Trading Company. He then politely asked who the man in front of them was. A blond man stepped out confidently and introduced himself as Kamara Tiwin, the heir of House Tiwin, and the eldest son of the family. He looked behind them and asked if the goods were the ones they had brought. The mercenary leader replied that, as he could see, everything had been delivered safely. Kamara nodded and ordered them not to waste time and to start unloading immediately. Kamara then turned his attention to the hooded man, Eugene, who was standing slightly apart from the others. He asked who he was and why he was not moving together with the group. Eugene stepped forward calmly and greeted him. He introduced himself as a knight named Yan Eugene. Hearing that, Kamara's expression changed slightly in surprise. As Eugene was about to tell him about Felid, a voice suddenly echoed through the courtyard, calling out Kamara by name and asking what he was doing. Kamara froze in surprise. Eugene heard the voice and felt something stir inside him. It sounded familiar. He slowly turned his head, his red eye narrowing as he listened again. That voice was unmistakable. A man in armor walked forward, his footsteps heavy against the stone. He spoke calmly but firmly, calling Kamara his brother and reminding him how many times he had already explained himself. He said that screening outsiders was his duty as someone guarding the castle. Kamara clenched his teeth slightly as the situation grew tense, while Eugene silently watched, fully aware that the person in front of him was someone from his past. He could never forget that voice. Memories from the past surfaced in his mind. He remembered the moment he was discovered while hiding, cornered and exposed. That man was the head of the vampire pursuit squad, the one who found him first. Along with young Durheit, he had tormented him without mercy. It was Knight Bertel Tiwin,